हेलो।
Thank you very much for attending this session on advocacy and the road to climate justice. Welcome to everyone. This is the last day of this 3-day meeting. We are exploring how communities and institutions can better support those displaced by climate change-related impacts. And a special thanks to Dr. Paul Clements of Western Michigan University for being the chief organizer. I myself am a member of the Climate Change Working Group at Western Michigan University. I want to start out by mentioning what you should have already gotten notification of, that this session is being recorded. Also, it would be great if we can have a lively question and answer session after the three panelists have presented. Please do submit your questions through the Q&A tab. The chat has been disabled for the attendees of the session. Okay, we will be having three presenters in this session. Each will be speaking for about 15 to 18 minutes, followed by, I hope, plenty of time for a Q&A. And I will give the presenters time for final thoughts at the end, unless we have a lot of questions. So, to start out, we have Dr. Alex Desherbinen, who is Director and Senior Research Scientist at the Center for Integrated Earth System Information at Columbia University Climate School. Dr. Desherbinen is a geographer whose research interests focus on the human aspects of global environmental change and geospatial data applications, integration, and dissemination. He will be speaking about climate impacts on rural to urban migration in India. Are cities ready for the influx? Please go ahead, Dr. Sherbinen.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I think I was intended for another session, and I explained to the organizers that I couldn't make that session. So my topic may be perceived as a little off topic for this climate justice session, but I did want to give a plug for a book that's coming out shortly that I contributed to. It's called Climate Justice Now, Crossing Disciplines to Combat Our Planetary Crisis. It will be with Columbia University Press, and chapter 8 of that volume is a chapter that I co-authored with colleagues on climate justice and climate mobility, international migration from Central America and West Africa. Time does not permit me to go into that topic in depth now, but I do commend the book to you. I think it's going to be a nice contribution to the field. I'd be happy to talk more about some of the conclusions that we came to during the Q&A. So basically, my interest in this presentation is to convey some research that we're doing in India on rural to urban migration and the way that climate can serve as a driver of that migration, this temporary flows and seasonal flows back and forth from villages. And then the second part will focus on how urban populations that may be migrating to, and migrants who move to cities may be also affected by climate pressures. So the first part really addresses this project called Displaced Livelihoods with a team of researchers, international team. Fabien Cotier used to be at CEAS, my center at the Columbia Climate School, and has now moved to the University of Geneva. And then Robin Van Dyne was a former postdoc. A lot of the original work on this was done by him. And then Chetan Choitani is a professor in India. It's funded by Columbia University. The agricultural sector in India is exposed to extreme heat, droughts, and floods. And if climate stressors are drivers of rural urban migration in India, then this increases urbanization rates and potentially results in the growth of slums and informal settlements that are highly exposed to climate stressors. So that'll be the second part of my talk. In India, there are about 600 million people who are dependent on agriculture as their main source of income. Climate change obviously affects agriculture through heat waves and droughts, and though large-scale migration to urban areas is not necessarily expected. And this is largely because there's strong local ties to ancestral land, and this cultural ties and place attachment prevent permanent relocation of households. There's also an argument of exclusionary urbanization, which suggests that the rural poor cannot settle permanently in cities because it's expensive and unwelcoming. There are often sharing rooms on the outskirts or in villages that are on the outskirts of cities, and the living conditions are poor. So there's very few local work opportunities outside of agriculture in rural India. So circular labor migration serves the needs of households to diversify their income sources. There's a strong gender dynamic with migration largely being undertaken by men. Migrants reside and work away from their village most of the calendar year, typically 9 to 11 months for the year, returning only briefly for major festivals, weddings, and other family obligations. The family stays put in the home village and receives remittances. This circularity of labor migration is often overlooked in climate migration research and is difficult to model due to lack of data. We can imagine that these are flows that occur, sporadically or every season, and that capturing data on when people move, how frequently they move is difficult. So can we develop models that deepen our understanding of the relationship between climate change and human migration in India? I think the answer to that is a qualified yes. And that is based on data that were compiled largely by Robin Van Dyne, but also worked on by Fabien Coutier. And these represent male agricultural workforce in each census year. And then data on things that might be mitigating factors like irrigation, percent irrigated land per village, major crop data, et cetera. We've also combined this with environmental data, largely a drought index called the SPEI. And this provides daily precipitation data at the village level using CHIRPS, a climate data set, and daily temperature and solar radiation data at the village level. So we can get a sense of the frequency of droughts. So since we have the monthly drought data for every individual village for 40 years, and we have censuses for the year 2001, 2011, 2021, I believe, was delayed and is not released yet. And we know male agrarian workforces and changes therein for these years. We can use a fixed effects model with 5-year time lags for our regression analyses. Was there drought in the village right before the census was recorded? And then we do that for 2001 and 2011 census years and investigate male agrarian workforce change. We model the share of male employment in agriculture as the dependent variable because local non-farm jobs in rural India are generally scarce. So that pushes many men into the circular labor migration. So this sort of bypasses the data problem, doesn't entirely solve it, but it gives you some sense of where there may be, in this case, larger proportions of the workforce that is working apart from agriculture. Recall that when censuses are taken in India, the primary residence of the male household member is listed as being in the village, but the percent of those, so the percentage of males who are not working in agriculture in a given village is a good sign of whether or not people are moving away from agriculture or, occupied in urban-based jobs. So this is a zoom into areas, I believe, on the border of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, with dark red being areas with greater than 25% workforce composition away from agriculture. This is drought data, for instance, just before a time slice just before the 2010 census, 11 census, sorry. So it's 2 years before that. And basically, you have different levels and conditions. And again, this area on the border of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh pops out as one that was experiencing at that time anyway, drought conditions. So the results basically suggest that in the one year after after a drought, you do see a decline, apologies, you do see a decline in agricultural labor force participation. You see that over here. And this 2 years after and 3 years after, you see an increase, and then 1 year after, 4 years after, for some reason, there's an effect as well, or a seeming effect. And then the average for the 5 years is significant, and it shows a decline in agricultural labor force participation. But that 1 year after appears to be the most significant and in large effect. So this is the effect after 1 year, and you can see relatively strong percentage point declines in places like Gujarat, and then also Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and Jharkhand. Um, so this is some projections. If we were to project forward and use ceteris paribus assumptions, we would find that increasing drought frequency might lead to even greater levels of abandonment, or at least seasonal or circular labor migration to cities. Um, so if the results are correct, we could expect to see more movement from rural areas to cities under increased droughts. Why do we observe these findings? This approach does not inform what individual and household level aspirations are. Things like other factors such as land fragmentation, changing aspirations, economic opportunities, mechanization, crop insurance may all play roles in terms of whether people choose to send households choose to send a male family member to the cities. Also, who migrates? Is it scheduled tribes and castes, backward class? Uh, so these are all reasons why quantitative models are limited. So our plan is to go to the field in January to conduct survey research that will hopefully inform some of these latter questions about the patterns of circular labor migration in India. So that's part one of my presentation. I think I have about 8 minutes left to cover the urban part of the question. So this is really based not on India-specific research, although I do have some findings for India, which I'll present, but it was a global assessment funded by USAID up until December of last year, just before USAID was closed permanently. This was a real travesty. But the project that funded this was called the Climate Adaptation Support Activity under USAID funding. And we were commissioned to basically do research on low socioeconomic status populations, which we sometimes refer to as the socioeconomically vulnerable populations. So low SES populations and their exposures in these cities around the world in low-income countries to climate stressors. The types of things that we looked at were heat, unsafe high temperatures, wet bulb globe temperature, warm spell days. We looked at water scarcity, cyclones, storm surge flooding, riverine flooding, and air pollution. This was for the past. We also used projections to look at future extreme heat, water scarcity, cyclones, storm surge flooding, riverine flooding, and landslide susceptibility. We then summarize results in this kind of formula, and I'll describe that in a moment. One of the real innovations in this work, led by Dana Thompson, who's our Associate Director for Climate Science Applications, was to create on a city level for something like 5,200 cities, a definition of low socioeconomic status neighborhoods based on smaller, denser land parcels in segments parts of the city where there's less road connectivity. So in this particular example, this would be an example where the roads are in red, water bodies are in blue, and this community here would be relatively, or these households would be relatively isolated from the road network and therefore qualify as low socioeconomic status. We're not calling these slums or informal settlements. We're simply saying that they're likely to be a lower socioeconomic status. So this is an example of Alexandria, India, where the red areas are low socioeconomic status. Blue areas are a more regular, let's say, planned development. And you can see red areas along and throughout the city. We did validate this, and so the black boundaries are those areas that were produced by local groups mapping informal settlements. So the black lines, and you can see a fairly high correspondence between the black areas and the red areas, which are our new definition of low socioeconomic status neighborhoods. I just say that it's not 100%, but it's a very strong spatial correspondence. If anything, the low socioeconomic status areas um, are larger or slightly more generous than the slum and informal settlement areas. An example of exposure to multiple climate risks would be we can undertake this through a look at Cilacap, sorry, in Indonesia. And so this is a city on the southern part of Java, and basically you can see the various variables mapped out here: water scarcity, cyclone winds. Apparently, it's not exposed to cyclones very much. Storm surge flooding, riverine flooding, which it has more of, and then air pollution. Maybe there's some mountain chains that trap air, bad air in this northeast corner of the city. What we then do is we take these low socioeconomic status areas and this sort of pinkish color here, and then look at the number of vulnerabilities and add them up. Uh, so if you have 3+ environmental vulnerabilities, your dark red, I would call them environmental exposures. You have uh, a lighter shade of pink, and then finally there's areas that just aren't affected. Note that these low socioeconomic status areas are often in less safe areas. They have less durable housing. They have fewer resources, social exclusion and impacts information that's available. And climate events can have catastrophic impacts on household income. So this is just looking at, a summary, kind of the different cutoffs that we use. We had to use essentially categorical cutoffs for each of these exposures. And we can then summarize results, for instance, at the national level in Indonesia. Look at Jakarta has many more exposures than, say, some other cities, and many more, low socioeconomic status populations exposed. That's the length of this bar here. And then you can look at future risks in terms of just total counts of different types of the sort of severity level of future risks, with heat risk being a big factor in a number of cities, along with water scarcity. For Asia, you can then summarize these results up by country. So this is for cities in all of these and throughout these countries, and you can sum up the number of people exposed. Each one of these squares represents about 500,000 low socioeconomic status people who are exposed in the past to climate stressors, and these represent, again, the future climate risks. The case of Calcutta, for instance, gives you an illustration for India of what things look like. The low socioeconomic status populations are mapped out here. You have high exposure across a whole range of climate variables: warm spells, extreme heat, water scarcity, cyclones, high particulate matter counts. So that's the entire city is exposed to those things. Then there's exposure to storm surge flooding and seasonal riverine flooding. And so you can sum up by city some of these exposures. You can see Calcutta has actually extremely high exposure to a number of factors, and something like 57% of the population is exposed to one or even 2+ risks. In the future, extreme heat and hurricane force winds and seasonal river flooding will be some of the bigger stressors it'll experience. And then you can summarize this at India level with kind of the same metrics, basically showing how many people are in the total urban population, the percentage that's low socioeconomic status, and the percentage of those low socioeconomic status populations that are exposed to 2 or more climate risks. So I hope you find these results interesting and illuminating. Here's some final sort of take-homes that many countries in Asia have large socioeconomic vulnerable or low socioeconomic status populations, and they're exposed to a lot of factors, and major factors include extreme heat, water scarcity, river flooding, and cyclone winds. And high humid heat is really a factor in many of these coastal cities, especially. So this just gives some take homes around the benefit of a geographic approach to studying these matters. I think I'm at time, so I will stop here. But I hope that you have found this interesting, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's wonderful to have so much data to go on. Um, those of you in the audience, please do enter your questions in the Q&A. We will have a general Q&A at the end of the presentations. So let's move right on then to Dr. Rakesh Kumar. Am I pronouncing your first name right, Dr. Kumar?
Yeah, you can,
Okay,
Mr. Kumar, even Kumar. Hey,
Kumar.
yeah,
Okay,
Kumar.
let me go ahead and introduce you then. Dr. Kumar is Associate Professor of Political Science at the Faculty of Law at Tirthankar Mahavir University, Moradabad, India. His teaching and publications focus on human rights, constitutional governance, democratic participation, and civil society engagement in the Global South. And he will be speaking about advocacy for climate migrants, a topic that I'm sure all of us attending this meeting are very concerned about. Please go ahead, Dr. Kumar.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone. Main topic of my presentations is related to the basically theoretical aspects that is related to the advocacy for the climate migrants. That means when we're talking about the climate migrants, what are their major challenges they are facing and what we can provide the basic solutions for their dignified lives. Generally, when we're talking about the migrants or advocacy for the climate migrants, for the different kind of the roles for the different kind of the persons as individuals, or maybe a kind of the groups of the persons, maybe civil society organizations, even the international civil society organizations, or government have the also very important roles to protect, to support, and given the recognitions to the climate migrants. But here is main important theoretical aspects that when we're talking about related to the what are the major goal for the climates related advocacy. That means where we can approach one of the important approach or goals of the climate's advocacy that is related to the recognitions. That means push for the legal acknowledgement even in the whole globes and even the international institutions like the United Nations. There is no any kind of the law that is protecting the individuals, climates, migrants, like the other kind of the refugee. They have the law. They can experience or they can benefit it. They are benefited or protected by the in the larger scales. But the climate migrants have not any kind of the internationals or even the international levels of the law. Second important goal for the advocacy of the climate migrants that is protections. That means to ensure the access to the rights such as the housing rights, education, health, and their livelihoods. So they can their displacement can they live their dignified lives. Another kind of the goals for the advocacy of the climate migrants that is the justice. Justice promote climate justice by the holding high emissions nations accountable for the displaced impact. That means that those nations at the global levels who have the more industrializations, they are emitting the more carbon dioxide uh, gases, and they are measure the global warmings at that places. They especially the poor persons, vulnerable persons, lower community agricultural migrants, they are facing the some kind of the difficult livelihoods. Another kind of the goals related to the advocacy for the climates migrants, that is the inclusive approach. That means integrate climate migrate into the national adoptions, developments, disaster risk adoptions policy. That means whatever the policy, state, international institutions, or even the some kind of the civil society organization, they must consider all kind of the scales, so can they include the inclusive developments. Now come to the different kind of the approaches, that is legal advocacy. That means ki when we talking about the different kind of the law, especially the climates, migrant persons, they have no any kind of the specific law. Few nations like the Fiji and other United Nations related to the Human Rights Council, they have adopted the resolutions, especially related to the some kind of the guidelines. But at such level, no, even the south and northern nations, they have horn the any kind of the legal aspects for the climate migrants, like the another kind of the international border migrants have the law. Another kind of the public awareness campaigns, that means ki media and educational initiative highlight the human sides of the climate migrants. That means ki what are the major impacts, especially when all nations who have adopted the globalizations policy, and most of the nations, they are facing a different kind of the challenges, especially the global warmings, droughts. So they have the also kind of the initiatives. Another kind of the be talking about the key advocacy approach, that is the community empowerments. Unless or until lower levels ground community persons, they are not understand what are happenings in the global phenomena, especially related to the climates, they cannot search a kind of the solution. That means ki we have to be focused, especially related to the common resources, some kind of the local goods. One of the important quotations of the Mahatma Gandhi, he told that ki nature have the enough resources that fulfill the need of the every persons of the globe, but nature have not enough resources to fulfill the greed of the one person. That means ki unless or until peoples can engage, they can minimize their consumptions, their chances of the some kind of the global warming over consumptions. Another kind of the we call the advocacy, yeah, different kind of the approach, that is the research and the data advocacy. That means ki we have the different level of the organizations and the international level, like the international organizations of the migrants, IDMC, International Displaced Monitoring Centers, United Nations High Commissions for the Refugees. Another one of the important reports of the World Bank, that is the Ground Whales report, that is producing the some kind of the different kind of the data, that is very research oriented, that is very helpful in the research for the all kind of the researchers. So these are the important kinds of the key approaches for the different advocacy. Now we have the international organizations who are involved, especially related to the climate migrants. One of the important organizations, that is the International Organizations for the Migrants, same like the United Nations High Commissions for the Refugee, United Nations Framework for the Climate Wake Conventions, and another that each have already discussed related to the grounds bail reports of the World Banks. These are the important international organizations who are working for the global uh, climate migrant persons, their welfares, their some kind of input, their empowerment, their research, there is some kind of the legal policy and all the things. Another, in addition to the international organizations, some kind of the civil society or academics kind of the networks, those are involved, or they are giving the some kind of the advocacy for the climate migrant persons. One of the importance, that is the Climate Actions Network, Action Network, Refugee Internationals, International Displaced Monitoring Centers, and environmental migrations portals. In addition to that platform on the disasters displacements, that means in addition to the international organizations, these are the civil society and some kind of the academic networks who are engaged, who are the some kind of empowering to the their some kind of the persons, so that their chances of the uh, more beneficial to the climate migrant persons. One of the important, some kind of the important or successful measure initiative taken by the different kind of the nations or a state, or sometimes we call the international institutions. one of the important nations that is the we called Kiribati migrations with the dignity. That means the first nations, very small island nations, they have make this some kind of the policy related to the migrations, especially climate migrants. And the Republic of Kiribati is a small island nation in the Central Pacific Oceans, made of the 33 atolls. Because of sea level rise, coastal erosions, saltwater intrusions caused by the climate change, larger part of the country face the risk of becoming the inhabitables within the decades. These are special given the importance that means ki persons community must be ready for their climate migrate. That means ki not we are providing the solutions after the climate migrants for their refugee status as a climate, but nations must be a stand before they are moving from one place to another place. Either they have displaced one place to another or they are crossing the border. That means ki a state or government are taking the initiative, providing the skills, knowledge, so that they can migrate with the in the dignified way. So this is the very important goals or objectives. One of the important goals or objective of the Kiribati policy, that is the human capital development. That means ki a state have invested in the educations, vocational training to make citizens employable abroad. That means ki in their nations they are facing the very high climates, yeah, global warming. So they can even go the abroad if they have the higher education, the some kind of the special trainings. Second important objective of the policy of the Kiribati, that is related to the labor mobility. That means ki negotiating labor migrants, especially with the New Zealand and the Australia. Another kind of the recognitions, that means encouraging the global community to treat climate migrant as a shared responsibility. That means ki not only this is the a kind of the responsibility of the one nations or one state or one place, but all the nation must be take the a kind of the shared responsibility, and they can prepare for their own citizens ki how they can cope up for the coming global warming and all the things. And another things that is related to the community resilience. That means strengthening local adaptations efforts while preparing for the future relocations. These are the important policy prepared by the Kiribati. Now, next important nations, they have also formed a policy that is related to the climate migrants. And this is a kind of the related to the their welfare's purpose. That means to plan and implement community relocations in response to the climate impacts. That means they are prepared the climates changing as a natural disasters, and they have given the importance to the ensure human rights, cultural value, livelihoods. They are also prevents forced displacements and promote dignified movements. Uh, Another important resolutions related to the climate migrants, that is given by the United Nations, that is the Human Rights Council, that is the important part of the General Assembly. Human Rights Council's resolutions 2021-23 recognizing the link between the climate change and their human rights. That means ki they are considering that giving the some kind of the climate migrant, they are facing their livelihoods, their foods, their unemployments, their health issue, so all must be considered as a human rights, uh, their rights. So these are the importance, a specific policy, some kind we are advocating for their some kind of the international law at the national level of the law. But in addition to the now I'm going to these are the kind of the theoretical aspects and the global phenomena. That means the one or two nations who have planned or prepared the some kind of the policy, a specific policy like the Fiji and the Kiribati and the even the United Nations Human Rights Councils. But in addition to that, I am shifting to the specific case study related to the India. In India is also facing the huge numbers of the persons who are internally displaced persons. There may be different kind of the regions, but one of the important region that is the climates. Most of the persons, especially in the India, especially in the Bihar, important the states, Jharkhand and Uttar Pradesh, that is the agriculture-based economic. Their agriculture pattern have changed. The main reasons of the changing of the agriculture pattern because of the climates changing, global warmings. These persons are migrating from the urban area and they have no any kind of the specific skills so they can get the employment in the urban area. Basically, these are the laborers. We can call these are the agricultural laborers and they have not even this kind of the skill, small kind of the technicians, but they are going to the other metropolitan city like the Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, and they are facing the different kind of the challenges. They are staying in the slums because their income is very low. They have no any kind of the skills. So these are very important serious concerns, especially in the developing nations, related to the climate migrants. Another scenario I have observed personally, like in India, so many the mountains or hill regions.
Dr. Kumar? Can you hear me? I think he may have frozen. I think. Oh, yep. Well, let's give him about 30 seconds and see if he's able to pop right back on. If not, we will move on to our next speaker and pick back up if he is able to join us. All right, Susan, if you wouldn't mind, I think perhaps we move on to our next speaker.
Absolutely, yes. For those in this symposium, unfortunately, Dr. Kumar's feed has been lost. We hope to regain him for the Q&A. Fortunately, he got through most of his presentation. We will move on then to Sasha Hadid. And she is a migrant justice organizer who's been heavily involved in corporate campaigning against the border and surveillance industry, particularly companies involved in immigration detention and deportation. In 2022, she co-founded the No Borders and Climate Justice Collective and created and ran workshops on why we need no borders to achieve climate justice for groups in the climate movement. She has recently been working with the Climate and Migrant Justice Organizing Group, focusing on movement building and policy work on the intersection of climate and migrant justice. So please go ahead, Sasha.
Oh. Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, you sound good.
Good. Let me know if anything happens with my Wi-Fi, because you never know. So yeah, thank you for the slides. I'm just gonna get my notes up, sorry. So yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak at the symposium, and thank you to all the organizers, the facilitators, the hosts for organizing the event. So yeah, my name is Sasha Haddad, and I am the coordinator at the Climate and Migrant Justice Organizing Group, which is a UK-based organization that does movement building on the intersection of climate and migrant justice. So I'm normally based in London, but I'm currently living in Lebanon. But still, this whole presentation is going to be very UK focused, which I hope might be interesting. So slide, please. So little agenda. I'm going to start by speaking a little bit about the current UK political situation to set some context, and then speak about how we organize as the Climate and Migrant Justice Organizing Group, particularly focusing on movement building, education, and communication, collaborative action, joint targets, policy. And then at the end, if there is time, I can speak a little bit about learnings and challenges from doing this kind of organizing. Slide. Sorry, I'm not doing my own slides. I'm gonna have to do thank you. I hope you enjoy this beautiful slide that I made about the current political context in the UK. I could speak about this for a long time, but I'm gonna use just give a few remarks. So something that's really scary in the UK and of course in like other contexts such as the US and across Europe is this increasing threat of the far right. So in the UK we had far right riots this summer and also last summer, and far right violence takes many forms in the UK. So it's a lot of protests outside accommodations that house people seeking asylum. So in the bottom right, that was one of these protests where they actually set fire to a hotel that was housing asylum seekers last summer. And then we have constant protests, like big demonstrations organized by people such as Tommy Robinson, who's in the top right, who's renowned racist, founder of this thing called the English Defence League. I won't get into him. My worst enemy, essentially. And then it's a rapid increase of St. George's flags or England flags going up all over different parts of the UK. It's increasing targeted attacks against people from migrant and racialized communities. And on top of this, there is a massive rise of ICE raids under our new government, the new Labour government, who came into power last summer, and a big increase in deportations. So there's been around 24,000 people deported since the last summer's election. There is also a concerningly large rise in popularity towards an ultra right-wing party called Reform UK, which was led by Nigel Farage, who's also another renowned racist figure. He was behind Brexit. Obviously also concerning in the lead up to local and national elections. So just to sum it up in a nutshell, definitely a context of increasing hostility towards migrants and also groups and organizations that are doing migrant justice work. Slide. Okay, so the Climate and Migrant Justice Organizing Group. So in the UK, the climate and migrant justice movements have historically been quite separate, and I'm sure it's the same in other contexts in other countries. So as a response to this, we set up the Climate and Migrant Justice Organizing Group. From now on, I'm going to refer to it as CMJ, just to save many seconds on the many syllables of that name. So it's a coalition of climate, migrant, and racial justice groups. And this was founded in April 2023, so 2.5 years ago. So we as the CMJ, I'm going to stop for now, believe that to defend people's right to stay in their communities and their right to move safely and with dignity, there is an urgent need to connect the migrant and climate justice movements across the UK. This obviously this translates to other contexts as well, but I'm just going to be speaking about the UK for this presentation. So we also believe that together we can counter the deepening of the climate crisis and hostile border systems in a way that strengthens both movements. So mobilizing climate groups for migrant justice and also empowering migrant communities to lead on climate action. And we believe that embedding migrant and racial justice in the climate movement and building strong communities from the ground up is essential in countering the threat of the far right. So I'll just speak very briefly on our organizing model. So there's 2 coordinators, me and my colleague, and then we have an organizing group that is made up of representatives from 12 different climate, migrant, and racial justice groups in the UK. And then we have a wider network, which is made up of over 200 climate, migrant, and racial justice groups in the UK. And so, we send out regular newsletters to them. We also organize lots of convergence events for people to meet and build solidarity across these movements. And we have worked tirelessly to make sure our network is like well represented. It's like a good way to say it. Like it's a good mix of like climate and migrant justice groups, also from like different parts of the UK, because a lot of the time this kind of organizing can be quite London centric. I'm from London, but I have to admit, yeah, it definitely is London centric, and also a mixture of grassroots groups and also bigger organizations and NGOs. Slide, please. So we have three main work strands. So the first one is cross-movement building, organizing and convening. So to facilitate sustained connectivity, trust and solidarity between the climate and migrant justice movements in the UK. So building towards a cross-movement network to coordinate collaborative action, skill and resource sharing through which to develop and deliver intersectional projects. So what does this look like in practice? Um, so national cross-movement convergence events, which we organize annually from now, because our first one was this year, but I can guarantee it will be annual from now. So we had our first one, it was the Climate and Migrant Justice Movement Building Summit in Sheffield, literally slap bang in the middle of the UK for easy access from different people from different parts. It was in January. Over 100 different climate, migrant, and racial justice groups came from all over the UK to participate in workshops and discussions and develop shared strategy and joint targets for both of our movements. On top of this, we organise 4 online gatherings per year for climate and migrant justice groups. So at these gatherings, we often platforms any local intersectional organising that's happening in different cities, or and we also contextualize our discussions based on current political context. So, for example, our last one focused on responding to the rising threat of far-right violence in the UK. As you can see, it's quite a big issue within the UK context, especially for people who do migrant justice work. So we also support local intersectional organising happening in different parts of the UK. And in the future, we hope to do more support for grassroots groups to organise local convergence events. Slide. Thank you. So 2, the second work strand, is education and communication. So we coordinate and promote a justice-centered understanding of the intersection of climate and migration, securing broad-based support for migrant justice alongside an understanding of climate justice that's rooted in anti-racism, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, and building positive narratives around climate-linked migration. So again, what does this look like? So we organize and facilitate workshops for movement organizations and networks. We organize public events, and we also write educational resources. So we wrote one about like dangerous narratives on climate and migration, for example, and like how to speak about it from like a comms perspective. And then we also recently came out with one on how climate justice groups can best support migrant communities in the face of the increasing far-right threat. Then, we also do cross-movement strategic communication. I'm not a social media girl, but this is what we have been doing. So, for example, during Refugee Week last year, we facilitated social media collaborations between migrant justice groups and climate justice groups, which is the one in the bottom right corner. And then in the future, we're hoping to develop a migrant-led spokesperson network as well. Slide, please. Thank you. So just quickly, speaking of narratives, what is our core framing to communicate about climate and migration from our group, from our organizing group? So a framework for progressive communications follows this value, villain, and vision structure. So value. Humans have always moved. Migration has always been an opportunity for people to build their lives. And so we need to start appealing to shared values rather than to the problem. This is shown time and time again to be more effective at shifting public opinion. Villain, to shift from migrants, refugees, people seeking asylum, being stigmatized and villainized, to to the real villains of the story, the governments, the companies, banks, investors that profit from hostile environment or profit from increasingly hostile border regime. So these actors are intentionally stirring up hatred and division, scapegoating people on the move to both push through hardline policies and to distract attention from their own failures elsewhere. And then vision. So for climate justice to equal migrant justice, our vision is the right to stay, for communities to be protected and to thrive despite the impact of the climate crisis, and the right to move, obviously, safely and with dignity. Slide, please. So just briefly on collaborative action. So this is to secure meaningful change and facilitate long-term movement building between climate and migrant groups through joint action, through joint campaigning. So working with climate organizations, networks, and grassroots groups to build support for migrant justice campaigns, developing joint campaigns aimed at shared targets and intersecting issues with a focus on empowering migrant groups to lead and engage in projects. So I'm just going to give an example of such a campaign from the UK context. It's one called Boycott Bloody Insurance, and they're also a part of our network. And so their campaign targets insurance companies that invest in fossil fuels, that invest in the border detention industry, invest in weapons, invest in the Israeli genocidal project in Palestine. And so through public pressure and grassroots organization, they aim to disrupt these financial lifelines to sustain these destructive industries and pressure insurers to cut their ties, because obviously without insurance, complicit companies would be unable to operate. So this makes insurance a key pressure point for campaigners fighting for justice, as well as a shared target between our movement. This is like amazing work that's been going on. And in the UK, a lot of people are doing this kind of corporate campaigning that's also focused on like investors or insurance companies that are complicit in both climate and migrant injustice. So yes, slide please. Finally, I will speak about our climate and migrant justice policy working group that we've recently started convening since the beginning of June this year. So the policy working group is made up of different actors from the climate and migrant justice sphere, from different backgrounds, obviously policy backgrounds, legal backgrounds, communication backgrounds, organizing backgrounds, like myself. I'm not a policy girl either. Maybe lived experience backgrounds, political analysts. So our project focuses on, I guess, two main upcoming events. Obviously, the COP30 summit that's coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe, in Brazil. And then more locally, we've got local and in Scotland and Wales elections that are happening in the beginning of 2026. And so our goals are to create this policy platform essentially. So, build solidarity by creating a policy platform for furthering migrant justice policy within climate organizations and also migrant justice organizations that seek to weave the climate crisis into their policy work, putting climate and migrant justice on the agenda. It's essentially about creating a strong progressive political alliance that can create pressure and localize these issues. So we want to connect with political figures with the intention is to create links also with the local climate and migrant justice groups who are already doing this work, particularly in areas where there will be these local elections next year in the UK. And then supporting policymakers and politicians to adopt the agenda. So by raising awareness of climate mobility and by proxy, the importance of climate and migrant justice amongst policymakers and politicians, we will be in a strong position to bolster support from the implementation of this agenda into their policy demands and decision making. So actually 2 years ago, we wrote an open letter as the CMJ, and the Green Party of the UK took parts of it and put it into their manifesto. So this has been proven to work really well. Slide, please. I'm just going to share with you our 2025 policy demands on climate-linked migration that my colleagues from the policy working group will also be presenting at some of the side events at COP30 this year. So, 1, reject the divide and conquer narrative on migration and instead recognize that fighting for climate justice means migrant justice. 2, commit to supporting the right to stay and the right to move, both at home in the UK and overseas, through providing support, including finance, capacity building for communities to manage climate impacts, safe pathways to at-risk communities, and immediate support in emergencies. And 3, ensure actions on local internal displacement and a national action plan on coastal erosion and flooding for at-risk regions within the UK. 4, enforce existing processes and frameworks on climate and displacement to recognize that migration is a human right, and climate reparations should be paid by historical polluters such as the UK if they fail to meet their obligations. Yeah, this is all about recognizing the huge responsibility with climate that the UK has for the climate crisis, and so operating from that context as well. And then 5, commit to a fair and equitable, I hope I said that right, phase out of fossil fuels based on the Green New Deal. I just want to finally, I know I've got 29 seconds, but can I just do my final slide? I will be very quick. Sorry. So just a very, very final note on climate displacement within the UK. And so there's Hemsby coastline. So Hemsby is a small coastal village in Norfolk in the east of England that's impacted by really severe coastal erosion. And so many of the residents are being displaced either from the storms and erosion, or because the local authority decides to demolish their homes. So you can see here on the bottom right that coastline. So Simon Measures, who is chair of the Save Hemsby Coastline campaign, is a member of our policy working group. So he does a lot of the policy shaping, especially about like internal displacement within the UK. And I recently spoke to him, and he said that the local authority announced last week, I think, that it will be demolishing more homes before Christmas, and has made the decision to eliminate all of the minimal defences along the Hemsby seafront. Which is really sad. And this is something that we're also working on within the UK context of internal displacement. I'm going to end there. I have a bit more, but I'll finish here. Sorry for going over.
It's okay, Sasha. You barely went over, and we have time. Thank you very much for this really important work that you're doing. I have a colleague in the UK who's been telling me about some of the developments there. Okay, please, all of you who are listening to this, think of some questions. There's lots of potential questions to ask. Before we get to the Q&A, though, Dr. Kumar is back with us, and I'm going to let him finish his presentation. So meanwhile, you can be thinking up questions so that we can have a lively Q&A. These were 3 excellent presentations, I think, covering different aspects of advocacy and the road to climate justice. Dr. Kumar, if you have about 3 minutes, would that be enough for you to finish your talk? Can you hear me?
Well, I'm
I
not
am
sure.
seeing.
He may still be having some technical difficulties. He has been popping on and off for a bit.
Okay. He's showing as being on right now, for those of you who can't tell, but yeah, we're not getting a response from him. So, okay, and we just did get a question. Good. Okay, for Alex from Dr. Paul Clements, is there evidence of migration away from urban centers that are most affected by climate change?
Yes, good question, Paul. So we we mostly, in our research, in our spatial modeling work, I think Professor Kumar mentioned groundswell, for instance. So I was a lead author of the groundswell report series, and we did a
Yeah.
lot of modeling behind that. We mostly, subsequently, we were contacted by the Mayor's Migration Council, and we did use some not groundswell results, but results of a similar analysis, similar gravity modeling work to understand how we did this work for the Mayor's Migration Council, and they were asking for Central American Mexico, to what degree did climate change potentially lead to greater urbanization? We actually found that border control, if you factor that into the model, and restrict people's movement out of the region and into the US, the border control actually leads to the greatest levels of urbanization. And the question of whether people are leaving urban areas, I think so far I don't know of any studies that indicate that people are leaving urban areas owing to climate stressors. There may be other factors at play, unemployment, jobs in the informal sector not, being as rewarding as people think or planned on. And of course, there's one hypothesis is, and there is some limited evidence for this, is that people may leapfrog. So they may go from a rural area to an urban area and then use the urban area in a way as a staging ground for moving onward internationally to other countries. So there's definitely evidence in a number of countries that that happens, and youth might leave the rural area and then decide that the urban area is not all to their liking or is not fulfilling their aspirations. And so they then in turn may choose to either migrate legally, or I'll say, in a clandestine manner to other countries of the world. So looks like Dr. Kumar is back, so I will stop
Yes.
there.
Thank you very much for that answer. Yes, Dr. Kumar, if you can hear me, why don't you go ahead and finish your talk? It looks like you had been within a few minutes of completing it when we got cut off. You're muted.
The presentation was basically related to the advocacy for the climate migrants, and whole discourse related to the basic theory, their scopes, their goal and policy. And in the last concluding climate migrant, especially related to the examples related to the in the Indian scenario. Most of the agriculture land, agriculture regions of the India, like the Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, and Odisha, and they have drastically changed the climates due to different kind of the climates, global warmings, agriculture patterns, using of the pesticides, and there is also the overpopulations. That means ki there are a number of the largest, most populated state like the Uttar Pradesh, there are around the 16 crore populations. Bihar, that is also around the 14 crore populations. But they are lacking of the employment. The major reasons of the lacking of the unemployment in the, especially in agricultures. That's why they are migrating in the different kind of the metropolitan cities like the Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, and they are facing the some kind of the different kind of the issue. They are facing the livelihoods. They are staying in the metropolitan city in the slums area. They are also have the crisis of the health. They are not proper health. They are not proper the food. They have not proper the skills. But the main reason behind the basically these persons are the agricultural laborers, and they are not any kind of the especially a specific skills trained persons. And when they are going to the metropolitan city, they are not proper kind of the work according to their ability, and they are getting the less wages. That's why their dignified life is very lower standards, and these are especially coming from the eastern parts of the India, especially the Bengal, Odisha, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. And another kind of the scenario that is related to the climate migrants in the, especially in the hill area like the Jammu Kashmir, Uttarakhand, uh, uh, the Himachal Pradesh. They are the over also they are the changing of the climates, global temperatures. So most of the persons they are staying, they are changing the some kind of, they are also shifting from the one place to another place, another places. So these are the whole kind of the patterns related to the climate migrants. So in the conclusion part, I want to say that it's related to the climate migrants, not at the level of the global institutions or the global level. They have no any kind of the specific law, unlike the refugee law, human rights law, and climate migrants facing the different kind of the challenges, even at the level of the global levels, even at the national level, or even at the local levels. So there is a need of the hours to we can prepare in the mind, we can in the future with very necessary kind of the climate change migrants, so we can provide it especially dignified life, we can prepare through the education, through the skills and different kind of the approaches by the state or civil society organizations. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Okay.
again, 3. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. You can switch.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
I think we're all on now for the general question and answer. Yes, 3 really valuable presentations. I'm curious, given that there are successes out there, like you mentioned, Dr. Kumar, about training and education so that climate migrants who move to the city have the skills they need to get jobs that will give them, a living wage and dignity. And I know there are cities in India and elsewhere that have programs to incorporate the climate migrants in some kind of planned fashion so that both the existing residents and the migrants can work together and deal with any cultural differences. And we've got so much expertise on this Zoom. Would anyone be willing to speak to that for how we can scale those sorts of programs up? Is it just a matter of money? Are there programs that can be run relatively economically? So much is happening just within the countries that is successful, and is the system for sharing these successes working well? And if not, what are the barriers and how can we overcome them? Anyone?
So I'm aware of a project, at least, that was funded undertaken by Mercy Corps in Niger. Niger is a country north of Nigeria. It's distinct from Nigeria for those who don't know, but it's a country that's highly, it's semi-arid to arid, and it's very poor. It's one of the poorest in the world. And historically, Nigerians, as they're called, would move from Niger to Nigeria to get work. And often they find themselves exploited. Young people find themselves exploited in urban areas. Migrants, unfortunately, as Sasha has attested, it's not just a phenomena in high-income countries that migrants find themselves unwelcome and often mistreated, but it's also a phenomena in neighboring countries, not always, but it can happen, that these historical migration patterns become ones of exploitation. And so the Mercy Corps project sought to train these migrants, and it was actually a controlled experiment where they trained some and they didn't train others. And I don't have details on the specific forms of training, but basically some ways that migrants could conduct themselves, that they would know their rights, that they might get a bit of training in advance on how to negotiate for jobs, that sort of thing. And then they later, would test to see if those who got the training fared better in Nigeria than the ones who didn't. I don't have details on the outcomes, frankly, because I lost touch with the person who described the project to me, but it's actually prompting me now to reach out to her and find out if there were interesting results from that. The other question of welcoming cities, that's part of what the Mayor's Migration Council is about. It's working with C40 cities to basically make cities more climate migrant friendly. And so maybe Sasha or Dr. Kumar have more information about the kinds of work they do. But what I do know is that they have worked with a number of mayors to try to destigmatize and otherwise encourage cities to be havens or safe places for migrants who need to leave their rural areas, for instance. Over.
Indeed. And it can be a win-win situation, ideally. Of course, Sometimes there's more barriers than in other cases. Sasha, would you like to address that at all?
Yeah, just a brief point going off that. We have a similar system, or like a similar project, I'd say, like in the UK. It's called the City of Sanctuary project, and we also have it for universities of sanctuary. So it's a national movement that basically, like, if a city or a university is particularly welcoming towards people seeking asylum or refugees, I mean, I think they have to, like, there's a criteria, um, like, committed to like supporting people through local groups, councils, schools, libraries, etc. They get awarded the city of sanctuary status, and then like they have to upkeep it. Um, I, I could go into it. I don't necessarily think it's always the criteria is strong enough, but yeah, just something similar in the UK context.
Great, great. Dr. Kumar, would you like to speak to that at all? And then after that, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Thank you. Uh-oh.
Hello, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, good, good. Yes, it's working. Go ahead.
Can you repeat the question, ma'am? Hello? Can you repeat
Uh,
your hello?
yeah, we are hearing you.
Can you hear us?
Can you repeat? I'm not hearing.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Um, okay, well, good luck reconnecting, and then let's go to one of the other questions in the Q&A. Uh, uh, Nicolette Lee asks, as migrants increase and grow the populations of cities, wondering about who is helping with housing and food, creating jobs, having the extra schools that are needed for the children of those families, right? Of course, again, this is such a big issue, isn't it? Anyone want to speak to that?
I think we often say, well, mayors, decision makers in cities should be doing more, right? But I think many low-income countries, this is easier said than done.
Yeah.
And there's two factors. One, I remember visiting years ago one of the low informal settlements of Nairobi with the African Population and Health Research Center. And the researchers there said, what's convenient for decision makers or policy makers in Nairobi and in other cities around in many parts of Africa is to say, these people came from upland, they came from somewhere else. They're therefore not our constituents. We're not really responsible for these people who are arriving because maybe they don't vote locally, or maybe they're just considered part of the problem and not part of the solution. And so, there's kind of a complex web of factors that may result in these people becoming excluded and not necessarily receiving benefits of being, full-fledged residents of the city. That said, there are groups that, there are organizations working with slum dwellers, and there are, charities and locally developed and community-led organizations that in many cases are trying to improve situations. They may not be providing food or health services per se, but they may be working on housing or, drainage or other issues that are important to the community. So I think I'll stop there, but you get the general idea. It's not, these are not simple solutions. It would be ideal in many ways if, the Green Climate Fund or the now Loss and Damage Fund were able to provide funds to some of these urban areas and channel it directly to community-based organizations. That's also a long and complex issue. It's it it would I've worked in the development sector long enough to realize that channeling money directly to community-based organizations is often an aspiration of many donors, but it's challenging because they're supposed to be accountable for every dollar and cent that gets spent in a country, and many of these CBOs do not have the kinds of financial and other accounting systems that may be required in order to track every dollar and cent. So saying they can't, but there may be a perception that they're unable to do so.
Yes. Thank goodness for all the non-governmental organizations that are working on this, community-based and international, etc. They are making a difference, of course. Sasha, did you want to speak to that? And I don't know if Dr. Kumar is available yet. Okay, okay. All right, let's go to the next question then. Thank you very much, Alex. Manjusha A. Wonders why, when we talk about climate migrants, there tends to be more of a focus on the aspirations and capability of the migrants instead of focusing on the role of the state and other factors influencing people's decision to move or not, which in the presentations in this session and elsewhere in this conference have been covering, again, just many, many variables. Manjusha notes that Dr. Kumar's last point is really relevant and wonders about the frameworks related to climate mobility or immobility and staying in place, and the human rights aspects, the role of the state, and what can be done. Uh, more, I think a question focused to things like, right, that mayors, C40, organizations like that, perhaps. Anyone? Okay, well, we have another question in.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, please, go ahead, Sasha.
I think Alex unmuted first, so after you. We're being so I will, okay. Yeah, I think this is really important, and that's why, like, when we lay out, especially like our narrative framework, when talking about like climate-induced migration, we think it's really vital to speak about like the right to stay as much as the right to move.
Yeah.
And the role of the state, of course, like coming like, you know, from the UK perspective, when we have like really horrible, like really rough like border policies in a really, you know, increasingly hostile environment. So like a lot of our campaigning work within this organizing group is focused towards, you know, targeting the government, targeting policy makers, and also targeting companies that are involved in fossil fuels, but also companies that profit from increasing border violence.
Thank you. Alex, did you want to contribute on that question?
I was typing a response to one of the other questions, so I'm sorry, Susan. I missed the gist of it. If you want to repeat it, I'd be happy to answer, or if you feel like we should move on to another one, that's fine too.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, it was about the role of uh, state, national, local governments, and how critical that is, and the efforts that are underway to make the most we can and change policy, such as what Sasha's group is doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, at least, so the US context is one that, as some people on this call, is shifting rapidly, and the federal government is essentially abdicating responsibility for a lot of social services and foisting them on the states and local governments. Local governments that are under democratic control are particularly targeted and are at risk of losing funding and support from federal sources. So the whole compact and the kind of agreement that was in place that would, block grants and other things that would help local authorities deal with issues as they arose, these things I think are being increasingly called into question. So again, I do think there's, in the U.S., there's also a very strong non-governmental sector and church and charitable sector, which could be called upon in increasing measure. And I know there are faith-based groups in many parts of the U.S. I've given money to one in Maine, for instance, where there's a large Somali population that actually support communities in different ways to integrate into, when they have economic needs, to meet some of those needs. I do agree with Sasha fundamentally. We should stop demonizing migrants for one. If we all just looked at our own family situations and said, if you were facing a high risk and you were, could be conflict, could be climate, could be just, destitution at some level, would you not move your family to a place where you felt you could get greater support? And I think that if we can make it a bit more personal and ask those kinds of questions, people might be less prone to feel the threat or fear of people who are moving. This kind of notion that every migrant is a potential fentanyl pusher or drug dealer, or it's a huge disservice and really is a lie, basically. I mean, sure, there are bad eggs. There's no question there's bad eggs, but there are bad eggs in our national in our among our citizens too. So that's no reason to demonize them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I've actually read that the crime rates are higher in U.S. citizens than in recent immigrants, for what that's worth, according to research by independent sources. We have one more question to address and then some time for each of the panelists to provide a few concluding remarks. We have about 7 minutes left altogether in the session. The final question is from Catherine Hamlin, who was someone who worked for USAID. Good for you, Catherine. I served in the Peace Corps myself. I know Alex did also. Probably a number of us have connections and who are in the U.S. who are involved in international service in some fashion. So Catherine was in USAID, wanted to share information about a project USAID supported in trilateral cooperation with Mexico's International Development Agency to match cash assistance with workforce training and placement in cultural communities in the Northern Triangle to reduce the northern migration trend. She herself was not involved, but heard about it as an interesting model involving these different sectors that did have some success apparently. So that's great. Again, I think we need to share information about these successes and use them as role models as much as we can. And of course, that is happening. But the more we can do to make that happen, the better, right? Any comments on that?
I think she wanted to unmute so she could speak more to that. So I don't know if that's actually
Oh, great.
possible.
Yeah.
Melissa,
Melissa, can you
unmute
do
her and
that?
allow her to speak, but I just don't know.
Yeah, go for it.
Which person? Was it Catherine?
Catherine Hamlin, if she's still here, I don't know if she's still on. Okay.
There you go.
Ah, yes. Hello, Catherine.
Oh
Welcome.
my gosh. Thank you. No, this has been an interesting panel. Such challenging topics globally, right? I don't have a whole lot more to share. I just thought I would share it as a model that I heard about recently. I mean, migration obviously is a topic that all countries address and USAID has dealt with in a lot of places, but of course the Northern Triangle has been a particular focus area in more recent years. And I just heard that it was pretty effective and interesting because USAID has not lots of examples in its experience in terms of trilateral cooperation, but where you can partner with the host country to support a third country on issues of shared, goals. And so I thought that one was very interesting. Of course, it's finished like everything else, but just thought I would share with you. And that's all I wanted to share, unless you have a question for me.
Well,
No, but I would
thank you.
say that in a broader sense, the the U.S. withdrawal from foreign assistance and the decline of foreign assistance owing to the Ukraine war from European partners, it's creating a perfect storm of issues in many low-income countries. And I don't know if you want to speak further to that, Catherine, but I just, as former Peace Corps and someone who, has many close colleagues who worked at USAID, had USAID funding in the past as well, for all there were shortcomings. I think there was a need potentially for some reform, but to close the agency down and say that, we're no longer going to send money to countries that are ingrateful and don't support us anyway. It seems a bit, like shooting our own selves in the foot, as well as being indifferent to the needs in low-income countries.
And of course, the biggest contributor to the greenhouse gases up there in the atmosphere nationally is the US. Yeah. Okay, yes. So thank you for joining us, Catherine. We have about 1 minute each for Alex and Sasha to make any concluding remarks they have. And Dr. Kumar, I'm sorry you apparently won't be able to do that, but we really appreciate your participation. Alex and Sasha, do you have very quick concluding remarks?
Yeah, I think one of the last points you made regarding the greenhouse gas emission contributions. So I mentioned at the outset of my presentation that we have a new book called, Climate Justice Now. I think I won't plug it further, but it's an interdisciplinary perspective on some of these issues. And for our chapter on international migration, we juxtapose a map on what's called the Passport Index. You can look it up online. It basically gives the power of each person's passport to be in a capability of obtaining visas to travel internationally. And it's basically a map that's the inverse of greenhouse gas emissions. So the countries with the least ability to travel internationally, that have the least power in terms of obtaining legal pathways to gain visas and otherwise to other countries, particularly those in the global north or the developed world, are those that also have emitted basically next to nil in terms of greenhouse gases. So this is a real issue and does highlight the sort of, from an international migration perspective, I find the relationship between climate justice and the historic framing, at least some of the framing of international migration. If you look at world systems theory or dual labor market theory, or a lot of these other theories, which are basically structural theories, someone else raised a question about aspirations, and that's the newest kind of approach. But the longer standing theories basically look at, in an international migration context, how the global north has for a long time exploited the labor of the global south, imported resources, imported raw materials, but restricted the movement of peoples from those countries. So these are real justice issues that I think need to be addressed. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Sasha, any quick final comment?
My final comment is, I think that its interest is growing around this intersection of climate and migrant justice, just to bring it back, I guess, to end on this, on activism, I guess. We've seen that climate groups in the UK are starting to recognize the links between climate and migration, and so I'm super interested to see how this is also playing out in other parts of the world. I wanted to put just my email in the chat. If anyone wants to speak to me further, or get any of the resources that we've created about the intersection of climate and migrant justice for movement groups. Thanks so much for having me speak.
Thank you so much to all of the panelists. Really appreciate the great work that you're doing. And thanks to all of you who attended this session. And we will go ahead and sign off now then.